What's up, Packer fans? I'm Nariah Chapek, host of Portland Lair Packers podcast, and thank you for checking out this video. We are 7 days into training camp. Our quarterback is now tied as the highest paid player in the NFL, and our defense is doing nasty things out on the field. Grab yourself a drink because it's time to pour ourselves another Packers podcast. All right. So before we get too far into the video, we got to do one real quick thing. I'm going to try out this new filter. It is the fancy
Ooh.
portrait mode. Let's see if that does anything.
I can see it.
It's not. Wait. No. We don't want the portrait mode. We want the
Oh,
center stage. There it is. And I have to say, if you are a Packers fan and you have been enjoying the content, or you know other people who might enjoy the content, I'd highly encourage you, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, comment down below, like the video, comments especially. I will reply back to any of those comments that you put out there. I love the conversation. Give us ideas on what you'd like to see for content, what you'd like to talk about, or just give us any feedback on stuff that we talk about throughout the video. So I'm going to exit center stage and go back to that. I'm looking for excuses on how to use that feature. Pretty much is where I'm at in life.
because it's super cool. Why wouldn't you find any reason to use it?
So now that the housekeeping's out of the way, we had some big news. On Friday night, Jordan Love finally got his contract extension. We're recording this on Tuesday night, so it's been a long 4 or 5 days, whatever it's been, digesting this, thinking about it, looking it over. We can break down the details. You know, he signs a 4-year, $220 million contract extension. It actually turns out to 5-year, $230.5 million contract because he's keeping his remaining year on his contract. $55 million annually, tied with Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence as the highest paid players in the NFL. What do we think? What are your thoughts,
It's
Christian?
around where we talked about it was going to be, and like we talked about before, being the highest paid quarterback in the history of the league, it doesn't mean much for long. I think we got Dak Prescott's contract coming this year, possibly, and next year there will be other guys on contract needing contract extensions. So, I mean, it's where we thought it was going to be, so it wasn't a huge surprise.
Well, in between those few days of recordings, I mean, we sent a couple. We don't really talk a lot outside. I think we try to keep our conversations as minimal as possible, so we have things to talk about when we actually do this. But there were a couple texts I sent you. I heard some reports and rumblings that maybe we were looking at like an 8 to 10 year contract that came out on the Pat McAfee show, and I'm like, man, they're really going to go all in and commit on this guy. But it finally came down on Friday night. It actually came 6 hours after Tua's deal came earlier on
long.
Friday morning. They're not saying that that's what kind of pushed things over the edge. I think it was just happenstance that it worked out that way. But yes, kind of diving into the finer details of this, because I do want to get into that real quick before I give you my thoughts. I had to scour, and I mean scour the internet when it came to figuring out how this contract was broken down. And I still don't fully grasp it 100%, if I'm being honest with you, because I don't think anybody understands how NFL contracts work outside of the GMs and the agents that sign these stupid things. But really, what I could find is it consisted of a $75 million signing bonus. That is the largest signing bonus ever, not just for the Packers, but in NFL history. He will get paid $25 million of that this week, another $25 million come October 4th, and the final $25 million of that signing bonus on December 27th. So originally I thought maybe he's just signing in his name and he gets 75 mil. No, that's going to be spread out over the next couple of months. Now, in regards to the $160 million that's fully guaranteed, 100.8 of it comes from the $75 million signing bonus and his salary in 24, 25, and 26. And then he's due $39.5 million as an optional bonus, which he will get in March of 2025. And then another $20 million on the 5th league day of 2026. So a lot of guaranteed money, a huge signing bonus. But as far as the cap hits, that's the biggest thing that I look at when I kind of see these contracts. How are we still going to be able to afford other players as we pay for Jordan Love? And it's ultimately not too bad. In 24, it's a $20 million cap hit. In 25, it's nearly a $30 million cap hit. In 26, 36. In 27, 42. And then that final year, 2028, which seems like a very long time from now, that jumps to 74.2 million. And really, by that point, come the end of the 26-27 season, the Packers are going to know at that point, is this a guy that we're going to extend another 5, 6, 7 years? Or are we cutting him and taking the dead cap hit? I guess ultimately my takeaways is, yes, it's a lot of money. No, I don't think that they overpaid him. And I've gotten a lot of, I work with a Bears fan. If he happens to watch this, he'll probably get a kick out of this. But they think that we paid way too much money for this guy, and I don't think it matters. At the end of the day, I really don't think it matters how much we pay any any of our quarterbacks. You are required to have, if you don't have a good quarterback, if you don't have a competitive quarterback, you're not winning any Super Bowls.
Oh,
Would you
yeah,
agree with
for
that
sure.
statement?
It's not the whole adage, defense wins
Okay.
championships. Yes, that's true. Defense is important, but you gotta have a franchise quarterback.
So, regardless of whether or not Jordan Love pans out to be our next Super Bowl winning Green Bay Packer quarterback or not, and spoiler alert, I think he will be, but you have this money allocated somewhere between 20 to 25% of your cap to pay a quarterback. You kind of have to figure out the other 75 to 80% on the rest of your roster regardless. So I think you pay Jordan Love. He's got to be feeling like, okay, the team believes in me and riding, Mount Everest, Cloud 9, whatever you want to call it. I think pay him or not, it doesn't ultimately matter because they're going to spend that money somewhere. And if they don't spend it on a quarterback that they think that can give them a championship, then you're just spending it on other positions that, yes, they're flashy players, but you're not winning any Super Bowls. I think regardless, you got to spend the money on Jordan Love. That's kind of where I stand with it. And to kind of double down with what you said with Dak Prescott, it doesn't matter. I don't really care. Like the whole tied for highest paid player thing is just lip service. That won't last long. It won't. I mean, by this time next year, you'll be like the third or fourth highest paid quarterback because everything's going to get restructured. So, key takeaways: glad it's over so we can move on with our lives. We spent 30 minutes talking about Jordan Love's contract last week. I don't want to do that again. And really, it's a 3-year contract at the end of the day. Packers have options to kind of get out of this if they ultimately need to after 2020. And we're going to ride this out for the next 2 to 3 years, see what we got out of him. And hopefully it turns out to be the guy for us.
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting that it's finally done and he's back at practice. That's the biggest thing, is that he's on the practice field building relationships, building rapport with his receivers, the rest of the team. So Saturday was their first padded practice, and that was Jordan Love's first practice. And I believe it was the first day that the
Right.
offense won the team drill, the team segment of practice, where the one's on defense, one's on offense, face each other in a scrimmage type situation. And the defense had been dominating all week last week. So obviously Jordan Love being on the field makes a difference. So my opinion on Jordan Love. I mean, all the commentators that I wouldn't expect on Jordan Love's side, like Skip Bayless, after what Jordan Love did to the Cowboys last year. I watched a clip, him talking about how he's a big Jordan Love fan. He's glad he got paid. He said, I think the segment he was doing it was a question from a fan or something. What jersey are you going to buy this year outside of Cowboys jerseys? And he said number 10, Jordan Love. So that was a surprise from Skip Bayless. But lots of other commentators, lots of other so-called experts in the field are a fan of the extension, and they're a fan of Jordan Love. So he's getting recognized now, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, there's no hiding it anymore. And it's absolutely crazy to think if we had done this, let's say we started this podcast last year and we're sitting here, it's July 30th, the night we're recording this, and we're asking ourselves, okay, is Jordan Love even going to be the guy? Like, can he get us to a winning season? And then fast forward to the end of the playoffs, or you get to the playoffs, you're like, can we win a playoff game? And then you fast forward to just a few weeks ago, he went from a guy that we didn't even know would be able to take over for the franchise quarterback position to the highest paid player, tied for the highest paid player in the NFL. It's just absolutely crazy. It was just such a huge ascent in such a very short amount of time. And I mean, ride or die at this point. And it sounds like Gutekunst had a press conference just this other day, and he was saying a lot of the same things. It's been constant ascent with them. They don't think that he's hit his ceiling yet, and we're gonna ride or die with this guy. I'm fine with that. Let's go 2,
Yeah,
3 years and figure out what
and
we
it's
got.
it's awesome to see the way that the Packers approached the successor to Aaron Rodgers. So how many teams do we see that their franchise quarterback decides to leave or retires or whatever the case may be, and then right away they're going to the draft, first round of the draft, they're drafting a quarterback and putting him in as the starter right away. How many times has that worked? I honestly can't think of maybe a handful of
Right.
times. And so the way the Packers did it is exactly
Yeah.
how I would want them to do it. Developing him for a few years under arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play and learning and developing. I mean, right out of college, he was described by scouts as a raw talent. He needed time to develop and grow as a player, which is exactly what the Packers let him do. And now look at the look at they're reaping the rewards of their labor.
Green Bay knows what they're doing. They know how to
Yeah.
draft and develop quarterbacks. And we're gonna get into this. I mean, I got some conversations about the competitions going on right now. I think they have a problem at quarterback. Maybe that's just a little bit of a teaser for you. But outside of Jordan Love, I think they have a problem. But they've proven historically that they love to draft and develop. That's something that Gutekunst has said that he wanted to get back to doing. Within the last couple of years, is you have a guy, your starter, and then you continue to maybe draft somewhere in that 5th to 7th round and develop and use that as either a good backup or trade it away for capital, whatever the case may be. Yeah, they say what you want, and that's the other thing that frustrates me. Bears fans and Vikings fans going, you paid him that much money. You don't even know what it means to take care of that position. You don't even know what it's like to have a star quarterback. Maybe there's a lot of buzz coming out of Chicago about Caleb Williams. And I know we closed our video last week with he might not be the guy. I'm intrigued. It sounds like he's having a pretty good start to training camp. I'm I'm really curious if it's possible that the Bears' misery at the quarterback position's over, but you that's a guy that I want to fail so much, so much. If there's nobody else that I'm rooting against more than Caleb Williams this next season, and that's a mutual thought for Bears fans as they're looking at Jordan Love.
So I've heard the buzz about Caleb Williams as well, how he's, lighting it up in practice during training camp. Sure, that's great, but what kind of defense is he playing against?
Apparently, they have a good defense. These are what my Bears friends tell me. I've yet to see this good defense that the Bears have put out, but they have offensive weapons. And speaking of which, I mean, DJ Moore, just within the last hour before recording, signed a
Yep.
4-year extension, making him the 7th highest paid. I think the 7th or 6th highest paid wide receiver in the league. So I mean, they got weapons, and really, quite frankly, they just need someone halfway decent probably to throw the football, and they'll win some games.
With the current situation in the NFC North, Packers Lions might start to develop into more of the big rivalry in the NFC North just because both of those teams are
Yeah.
on their way up and both in Super Bowl contention right now, I would say, with where the Vikings and Bears probably not. So you may see a little bit more of a bitter rivalry between the Lions and Packers than we have in the past.
Yeah, I agree. Those are the 2 teams in our division that are ascending, and yeah, I mean, the Packers are by no means a clear-cut favorite they used to be
Mhm.
runaways to win the division, but no, I'd say they have to get over Detroit at this point. So, we're gonna switch things. I wanna talk a little bit about coach interviews at some point that happened. We finally got to hear from Jeff Hafley. We got to hear from Adam Stenavich and Rich Bisaccia a couple days ago. And then I kinda wanna go through, like, some of the competitions, or actually many of the competitions by each position. But I wanna try something a little bit different as we explore how we wanna do this. You took some own notes and thoughts that you wanted to talk about that I asked that you did not share with me, because I kinda wanna see, I wanna get some topics without any chance to think about it. and hear what you have to say. And so I'll turn it over to you. Is there anything particular that you want to talk about?
Yeah,
What do you
well,
want to talk
so
about?
one thing that I've noticed ever since we started all this and deep diving into the interviews and stuff like that, I've noticed that Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs have developed quite the relationship. So it sounds like when Josh Jacobs was officially signed, Jordan Love kind of took him under his wing, helped him find a place, and they've developed quite a friendship. And Josh Jacobs more recently has come out and said that part of his decision to come to Green Bay was because of actually he was in Vegas with the Raiders and they were watching film preparing to play the Packers last year. And there was a play that he watched where Jordan Love back shoulder throw off one foot over to Aaron screen to Aaron Jones.
He didn't take it to the house, but it was like one of those catches. It was
Right.
like right between the numbers,
Yep.
I think is what he said,
And
right?
yeah, so Josh Jacobs attributed that to
Go ahead.
part of the reason why he chose Green Bay over some other options that he had, which I was just researching today, and he actually had offers for more money. I think it was like even $4 million more from the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Broncos. But when asked why he decided on Green Bay,
Yeah.
he said he's looking to win a championship, and he didn't see that with those other teams. So I think that relationship is really interesting and very cool to see a relationship between a quarterback and a running back like that. Two of your big playmakers on the offense reasoning why Josh Jacobs wanted to come to Green Bay because he sees what we see in this Packers team, a lot of potential. So that was cool to read about, cool to hear about.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things like that. I mean, you're right. From when Devontae Adams, he had a podcast on the Max Crosby show on the podcast on the offseason talking about how, when Raiders played the Packers out in Vegas, he was super impressed with how Jordan Love carried himself and played and was questioning. He wouldn't say flat out whether or not he was questioning leaving Green Bay. He made his choice and he's living with that. But that wasn't the Jordan Love that he saw in his first 2 years while he was still in Green Bay. There's a lot of interesting player stories like that and respect from other players around the league that have seen this side of Jordan Love. And yeah, it's going to be a relationship that continues to grow for sure. That whole culture on the team, everyone is so locked in and focused and hungry. And the fact that you look at other player contracts, I think Christian McCaffrey is getting like what $20 million a year in his running back salary. And Josh Jacobs is at $12 million a year, a 4 year, $48 million contract. Yeah, some players chase the money, like Devontae Adams did heading out to Vegas, or some players chase that opportunity to win some championships. And Josh Jacobs did that. And I fully believe he is I love Aaron Jones. He's such a great player, and I love what he brought culture wise. And he was like the face of Green Bay. But Josh Jacobs is an upgrade at the running back position. I'll take that to the grave. He is far more talented. Just this past, I think it was today actually, Tuesday in practice, they did running backs versus defensive backs for the blitz drill, and Josh Jacobs stood out amongst all the running backs and on that offense, holding his own, making blocks. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see, and I'm glad. It's only going to get better, Christian. The longer that they play together and the more that they get on the same page, it's going to be a very lethal backfield
Yeah,
that we
for
have with
sure.
those two.
Yeah, the I heard about the running back linebacker drill too, and the big takeaway I had from that was the pass blocking, pass protection, picking up the blitz. No one could get through Josh Jacobs
Right.
in that drill, which is a big deal. That's when you look at starting running backs in the league, that's a big thing that coaches look at is their ability to pick up blitzes and pass protect because they're not always going to get the ball and they're relied upon to be, that protection for the quarterback's backside a lot of times. And if you can't pick up that blitz, you're not going to be on the field because you're putting their franchise quarterback in danger at that point. So yeah, that's a big deal, the pass protection. And talking about running backs, I also saw there was something that I read about AJ Dillon. Just we've talked about his down a little bit, and he looks both Matt LaFleur and Hafley both have said that they think that he looks best shape of his life, best he's ever looked on the field.
Yep.
So I saw a little bit about what the actual numbers are for how much weight he lost, what kind of shape he's in. So last season he came in at 252 pounds, 9% body fat. This year he's in at 245 and 4% body fat. There was a picture after practice today of him and his family and he had his pads and his shirt off. He was shirtless in the picture. He look it, he looks like a completely different guy. And is that good or bad? I mean, because he was really that
Yeah,
pounder. He was that goal line play. You need to punch it through the on the 1 yard line. He was that kind of back for us. And with less weight, is he able to do that still?
right.
Seeing that picture today, I kind of questioned it a little bit. I was like, oh, is it really a good thing that he lost that much weight? But it'll be interesting to see his his production this year after slimming down and getting in that kind of shape. And then also Marshawn Lloyd is back at practice. He was out with an injury. Sounded like he was talking to the media saying it was a hip flexor injury. So good to see him back. And then they were asking him about coming to Green Bay, coming to Wisconsin, and it was kind of funny. So apparently he's a big sushi fan. He was asked where he was going to take his family the first time they come to visit,
Yeah,
um, what restaurants he was going to take him to, and he mentioned this sushi place like 4 or 5 times. Said that at one point he was there 3 nights in a row, so the wait staff knows him by first name now. So I thought that was kind of funny. Marshawn Lloyd, the sushi fan.
when they asked him that, I was curious whether he was going to answer. I mean, for those of us that take the time to watch these player interviews, I'm like, this dude's literally going to tell everyone where he's going to take his family to dinner when they come in for family night in a couple days. You don't think that every Packers fan, I don't know, maybe Green Bay residents are used to it and it's just, it is what it is. If you're a Green Bay resident and you're watching this, comment down below and tell me if you run into Packers fans and you think it's cool. But I wasn't sure he was actually going to list anywhere because I just figured that place would absolutely fill up with
Oh, sure.
reporters or fans. So I thought he's going to keep that quiet. Speaking of, taking a pay cut though to, chase a championship or because you like to play where you're going to play,
Yeah.
AJ Dillon's that guy, right? He took a very friendly veteran, like minimum contract, stayed in Green Bay for $1 million, I think is somewhere around. I still haven't looked that up, but that's a guy that could have went to free agency a little bit longer, could have took some more money somewhere else, possibly, right? But he wanted to stay in Green Bay. He's the mayor of Green Bay. And I agree. I don't know what we're gonna get from him this year, but one thing that I will double down on is they asked Adam Stenavich how he looks, and they're saying he's running the ball harder than they've ever seen him run the ball, which is I like to hear that. And then he agreed with Matt LaFleur that he looks the best he ever has. So yeah, maybe he's not that bruiser. Like he's never really been that bruiser. He's never been that 4th and 1. I need a yard because a lot of times he just gets stopped, and you're like, how the hell are they stopping this guy? So maybe he'll get a little bit more chip in his step or boost in his step. I think this creates a great opportunity because we kind of just went through all the running backs. I kind of want to go position by position and just see if there are headlines in each position group that jump out to you. Because I think naturally we might just hit some of your notes of what you want to talk about. But yeah, from the running back standpoint, I think that is you're looking Jacobs, AJ Dillon, and Marshawn Lloyd, bing bang boom. I think you got 3 guys that's a solid group right there. Not a lot of question marks. It's just continue to grow and improve every day. Maybe the biggest question mark is AJ Dillon and what kind of back he will ultimately turn out to be. But that's a position group that I have no doubts that will be successful moving forward.
Yeah,
Quarterbacks.
we've hit on most of it with the running back competition, and I don't even know if it's a huge competition there, just because of the type of offense Matt LaFleur wants to run. I mean, you're going to see all three of those guys on the field. It's just a matter of which guy sees those early downs, first, second down, where it's a typical run play. We've touched on Josh Jacobs. It's a lot of people are doubtful of Josh Jacobs because of the year he had last season. But look 2 years ago. 2 years ago, he
Yep.
led the league in rushing. Last season, one of the big reasons why he had a down year was because they didn't have a quarterback in Vegas. They didn't have somebody that the defense was worried about, and so they just loaded the box against him. He's still the same guy. He's not past
Right.
his prime, so I don't have any worries about Josh Jacobs being the lead back. But Marshawn Lloyd is gonna come in, and I think he's gonna take some carries away from both guys. I use a site called Player Profiler, a lot of times for fantasy stuff. But Player Profiler had him as the number six running back in the class. So in this year's draft class, he was the number 6 running back. The best comparison based on his 40 time, his speed, his agility, his toughness, there was a bunch of different aspects that went into it. The best comparison that they gave was DeAndre Swift. So that's a awesome comparison to have, because if he can develop into a back similar to DeAndre Swift, that's a huge
Yeah.
weapon for the Packers. So I see him taking carries away from both Dillon and Jacobs, but ultimately I think Jacobs wins the starting role, whatever that means in Green Bay.
And to tie a kind of a ribbon on the running backs, as we'll get into these other position groups, Brian Gutekunst in this entire he GM of the year. I mean, we're only a week into training camp. We definitely need to get to some preseason games here sooner than later. They almost seem too far away at this point because we got to see how these guys perform in game time action. But there is competition everywhere in almost every position, and then there's depth too. So when we talk about breaking down some of these positions and who's leading here and who's leading there, I mean, you're there's so much potential that if a player gets hurt, you're going to have someone who's just as good to step up right behind them. And there could be opportunities throughout this upcoming season where whoever starts at safety alongside Xavier McKinney, maybe he gets hurt in week 3. The next person steps up and there might not be any going back. The one area that we don't have that strength, I will say, and I want to circle back to this, is quarterback. I think behind Jordan Love, we got some question marks, and we got some pretty big question marks too. Sean Clifford has had a rough first week of training camp. Now, with Jordan Love sitting out the first few practices, he took up the role with the ones, and the defense was just eating him alive. And again, even when Jordan Love came back and he was practicing with the twos, I mean, there's 2-minute drills that were stopped on the first pass play that ended up in interceptions. There's a lot of question marks behind Sean Clifford and whether or not he can be that guy. And then we look at Pratt, who was the quarterback we drafted in this last year's draft. Of all the interviews that I watched over the last couple of days, when Adam Senovich was asked what he thought of Michael Pratt and his progression, it was the most awkward thing I've ever watched, because you could tell. I know I'm in sales. I got a pretty good, I feel like, gut instinct when I watch a person's reaction on whether they're just bullshitting you, some sort of cockamamie excuse, or if they're legitimate about what they're talking about. I don't think we got anything in Pratt either. He had said that he has a good work ethic. That's what he had to say. Ultimately, there was a lot of back and forth about Pratt. How's he looked? He's got a good work ethic. And I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Like 90% of the NFL teams out there, if your starting quarterback goes down, it's over. I get it. But if we're talking about building that backup quarterback and having somebody there, preseason A needs to come around to see if maybe the Packers defense is just that good. But B, that's my biggest concern right now after 1 week, is that there is literally, it sounds like there's nobody behind Jordan Love if he goes down.
That's what
for
I
a
was
game or
gonna
two.
say, is maybe the Packers defense is just that good that the backups are really struggling against them. But it's kind of funny that so remember last season, early in the season, when Jordan Love was having his struggles, there was a lot of people out there that were like, put Sean Clifford in. He had a great preseason. Like, Jordan Love's not the guy. And now
Oh,
look
yeah.
where we're at. Highest paid quarterback in the league, and Sean Clifford
Yeah.
not looking good. Don't even know if he's going to make the team. So it's very interesting to see. But yeah, that's definitely a spot where they're going to have to figure something out. And if they don't, what we see a lot is when a team loses their franchise quarterback and they don't have the answer at the backup position, they go out and pick up a veteran guy or pull some guy out of retirement or something like that. So I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that's where the Packers are at. They're not super concerned about it right now, but yeah, is a question mark for sure.
Let's talk about offensive line. What are you hearing about the old offensive line? Another sound position, a lot of competition, a lot of depth too,
Yeah,
I would agree, or I would say. Probably the biggest area that we're looking at on the offensive line is Jordan Morgan and
yeah,
essentially where he's going to fit in. So, not to maybe steal your thunder, but they feel like the best place to put Jordan and Jordan Morgan at JM, as I like to call him, because we're old pals, is that they wanted to find a position that he could settle in and have a best chance at a starting position for the upcoming season. And they landed on that right guard position. So it really seems like they got Walker set up to be that left tackle, Jenkins to be the left guard, Zach Meyer out on the right tackle, and then I'm forgetting who our center is. It's Josh Myers. So they got a stout kind of position there amongst the line. Seems like right guard's going to be the best option for Jordan Morgan. I'm liking this strategy that they're putting on. Yes, he comes out and is drafted as a left tackle. It's kind of,
Mhm.
but he's versatile. That's the fancy thing that the Packers always look for in their linemen. But I'm liking that they're going to give him the best chance to earn a starting role, and then if he succeeds there, maybe they'll have that ability to move him around. But the offensive line is sounding like it's
Yeah,
coming
the
together
only
pretty nice.
comment I have on it is the name that I hear anytime they're talking about the offensive line is Jordan Morgan. Now, is that because he's the new kid on the block and everyone's trying to see where he fits in? But in my opinion, if you're hearing his name and it's a positive thing, then it's a good sign that he's probably going to develop into a good player for that offensive line. So that was my only comment is I've been hearing his name a lot. So I see that as a good thing.
We'll stick with the offense and we'll clump wide receivers and tight ends together. I mean, no number one wide receiver. Sounds like things are going pretty well, especially helps having Jordan Love back out on the field. I have some question marks. Maybe it's 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 early. It's early. We got to get some more playing time and stuff. Not hearing a lot of headlines from the tight end group, primarily Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. They're not really showing up on a whole lot of feeds. It doesn't mean that they're not doing great. Maybe everyone else is doing better stuff. The one thing I had read was that Luke Musgrave dropped kind of a crucial pass in their 2-minute drill on Tuesday with Jordan Love threading the needle. But I really like what I saw of him last year. I think that those two tight ends have a lot of upside to him, and Musgrave struggled with injuries. Hopefully, he can find himself on the healthy side of things. When it comes to the wide receivers, I mean, I think Dobbs
Yeah.
is the guy that we got to talk about, right? You
Yeah,
got
I got a
someone else you
couple.
want to talk
I can
about?
talk about a couple. Well, so
Go for it.
back to the tight end
Yeah.
situation. So it's very interesting and very good to see how Tucker Kraft actually came into his own last season. It was because of Musgrave's injury. So Musgraves was drafted as the pass catching tight end that was going to be a playmaker for the Packers, and he came in and he did that. But then he got injured, and everyone was like, "Well, what are we going to do now at the tight end position?" Well, Tucker Kraft came in and filled that role right away. And what I've seen so far this year there is that they're interchangeable. Really, you can. It doesn't matter which one of them's on the field. Jordan Love can
They
have
are.
confidence that he's gonna be that pass catching tight end for them, or both of them on the field, which is a huge benefit. You look at teams like the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce is the leading receiver for that team, and he's a tight end. Well, if you got two tight ends that can be a leading receiver, you defenses aren't going to know what to do. So yeah, the tight end situation looks good as long as they both stay healthy. We can hold off on talking about Dobbs because I know we both are going to get there. But one wide receiver that I think is a little bit of a sleeper is Dontavian Wicks. A lot of things in the fantasy football realm that
Go
he's
ahead.
kind of a sleeper. He's a late round pickup in fantasy drafts, but I've also heard some commentators. Steve
Pretty
Smith
sure it was
said that
Steve Smith.
Dontavian Wicks reminds him of Devontae Adams. So I think that's a guy to watch out for this year. He's not really on the radar for a lot of people, but I think he performed very well last season. And as long as he continues to develop and get better, he could be the standout week in and week out. So it's interesting to see that wide receiver core. You don't know who it's going to be each day. I think it's going
Yeah.
to be all those guys are going to have big games throughout the season.
Yeah. You look at these receivers. I've heard the same things. You're way more in depth into the fantasy side. I'm not even going to play fantasy football this year. I hate fantasy football. I just hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it with a passion, actually. I just,
We we are
just
very
don't
opposite
like
in
it.
that. I'm in like
Anyway, I'm hearing the
10
same
different
things.
leagues, and that's my main hobby is fantasy football.
Well, now you
Yeah,
got a new
yeah.
hobby, and it's a podcast, and it's going to require some time and effort. I got time for that. Anyway, when it comes to these receivers, yes, I'm hearing the same thing about Wicks. You look at Watson. As soon as Jordan Love came back, this defense was playing such an aggressive upfront press coverage. What does Love do? Is he throws, a deep ball right over the top of the defense to Christian Watson and completely exposes them. So Watson, when healthy, has that explosive long ball deep play making ability. You got Jaden Reed, who is one of the most up and coming slot receivers that you can possibly want in a team. Essentially, Adam Senovich said in his press conference, you want to find ways to get him the ball. So ultimately, you just got to figure out how to incorporate him and get him the ball as much as possible. There's so much talent on the wide receivers. There is talent on the tight ends. You put in that running back. This offense is going to hum at some point, whether it will be week 1 or week 5 or week 10. Hopefully, it's sooner than later. But there's no reason to believe that this offense can't go. And then you talk about Romeo Dobbs, and he's been the guy making most of the headlines this first week. Jair went out of his way, and Jair does Jair things. I think he's toned down quite a bit over the last couple of years, especially after he got in trouble last year after that whole debacle in Jacksonville. He's toned down, but he still says things that make you smirk and maybe laugh out loud, depending on how much you like the guy. Predicted the Packers are probably going to win a Super Bowl this year, or not probably. They are going to win the Super Bowl this year because the Super Bowl is the same day as his birthday. And then when it came to Dobbs, he's the second best receiver that he's ever had to, cover, or he considers him the second best wide receiver behind Devontae Adams. But Alexander talks. Dobbs has been impressive. He's just grown year over year, and his route running has gotten a lot better over the year over year. I was thinking while I was reading some of this stuff and hearing Alexander talk, if I'm making a bet on who's going to be the leading receiver this early into the season, it's got to be Dobbs, and it's not necessarily because of his playmaking ability. He stays healthy. He You run routes and get open, he's going to find the ball. He's gonna have yards. He's going to have touchdowns. He's got a lot of that could be our number one wide
Yeah.
receiver by the
Yeah,
end of the year.
definitely. I can see that too. I mean, but like we've talked about, you could see it with any of them. I think it'll be interesting to see if Christian Watson stays healthy. I know there's been a lot in the media about him going to a specialist and saying that he got his hamstring issue figured out. So if he did and he's consistently healthy, he's definitely explosive, and we just may not have seen of a full healthy year from him, and this might be that year, and he pulls away from the pack as Jordan's favorite target, but that remains to be seen. He's got to stay healthy.
There's just too many guys to
Yeah,
cover. You can't cover them all, and that's
right.
a problem if you're a defense. I mean, that's a beautiful position
Hmm.
that I think we're in right now with these wide receivers. It's part of the reason why you can pay Jordan Love as much money as you can is that they're all on really cheap,
Hmm.
inexpensive contracts, and they all have a ton of upside. They have not hit their ceilings. None of them hit their ceilings. Let's move on from wide receivers. I don't think there's a lot to talk about on the defensive line. The defensive line is sound. TJ Slayton, I think he's coming into his third year, made a couple headlines as just kind of being a guy that's continuing to progress and kind of be that anchor alongside Kenny Clark on the defensive line. Transitioning to linebackers, and you can touch on defensive line if you'd like when I get done with linebackers. Biggest thing there, um, I mean, Quay Walker is going to be inside of his element. He's been playing a lot faster so far in practices. He looks a lot more comfortable, a lot more energetic. Opposite side of him has not been Edrin Cooper, but it's actually been Isaiah McDuffie. An interesting fact that I found out while listening to some interviews and whatnot is that McDuffie actually used to he was the starting linebacker in Boston College when Jeff Hafley was out there under his first year coaching. So these guys have some history together. You got to see him in college, and now he's coaching them in the pros. Speaks very highly of his work ethic and the man that he is. It's going to be again. We talked about depth. Edgerton Cooper has a lot of upside. I think he was a great draft pick, but he might not get a lot of playing time right off the bat if Isaiah McDuffie continues to kind of prove himself and be that guy on the opposite side of
Yeah,
Quay.
touching on the defensive line, I don't have a lot to say. I know we'll get into the coach press conference for the all the coordinators, but something Halfley was asked about was TJ Slayton and if he's the right fit for this defensive scheme, and sounds like that's not an issue. And he's a bigger guy, and he's very good at plugging things up in the middle. And if he can get penetration, that's a huge deal. He's going to disrupt things. So that was my only touch on the defensive linebacker. You kind of touched on everything that I was reading into. I think that I think that maybe we see a little bit different player in Isaiah McDuffie in this defense that he's familiar with a coach that he's familiar with. In the past, he hasn't been necessarily a standout linebacker, but he's in a defense that he's familiar with. So maybe we see a little bit different player and more production out of him. The other thing, I think Quay Walker is in a ideal position with this new coaching change. Just from what I saw with Hafley at the podium, it seems to me like this is the coach that Quay Walker is going to need to continue to develop and get better, but also to hold him accountable, challenge him, and hopefully we don't have as many of the attitude or emotional responses during the game with Hafley at the helm of the defense. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see who ends up opposite Quay Walker. Right now it looks like McDuffie, and it may stay that way because he's in his element in this 4-3 defense.
I'm starting to think that more and more as I read about how these practices are going. I don't think it, I think that depth chart is going to be absolutely useless to the Packers come, week 5 of the NFL season. I think there's going to be enough potential to mix and match and put people in where you want. They asked Hafley, do you want more of like a hockey lineup or do you want to have like your best guys out there at all times? And he was, it's a mixture of 50-50. At certain plays, you're going to want your best players out there. And it's nice to keep them fresh too, because if it boils down to the fourth quarter, you're going to want to have your best players in there. You want them to be fresh. It just harkens back to what I've been echoing this entire episode is there's depth. There's so much depth in all aspects. The Packers are going to have a really tough time narrowing this thing down to a 53-man roster. It's there's a lot of there's competition. There's a lot of good players at every position, including, should we group together the cornerbacks and the safety groups? I mean, obviously Ja's going to lock down one of those starting cornerback positions. Eric Stokes has had a rock solid start to training camp, but then you have Valentine, who's had some great practices. You've had Ballantyne, who's had some good practices. Then you have this 7th round draft pick, this Kalen King fella, who picked off Jordan Love in practice just the other day. I love it. I just love hearing about the competition and what these cornerbacks are doing.
I agree.
Right now.
It's always good to have competition. It's always good to have depth. And the issue the Packers have, like you said, cutting it down to a 53-man roster, that is probably the best issue that they could have right now. You don't want other issues. If that's the biggest issue you have a solid team and you're going to be successful. If I'm rooting for one of the cornerbacks to earn that position opposite Jair, it's Eric Stokes. When they drafted him, I was super excited about him. He's super fast, and that's what you want at the corner position, because look at the wide receivers they're matching up against. The wide receiver position is typically the fastest position on the field. You got guys like Tyreek Hill that's faster than anybody in the league. So you need to have speed at the corner position. So my early cornerback that I'm rooting for, I guess, would be Stokes. But again, that competition is great, and whoever ends up at that starting position, they're going to mix in and out anyway. But whichever one comes out on top is going to be interesting to see.
Kalen King is probably going to be one of those guys. We didn't even talk about Keyshawn Nixon.
I feel like Keyshawn Nixon's position is solidified as that slot corner or that slot back. I guess I don't even necessarily lump him in with the competition at that other corner position.
But that's where I think Kalen King is going to find his niche. At least that's kind of the early indications. We'll see how it progresses throughout training camp and when we get some game action. But yeah, I think Ballantyne and Valentine, it's fun to say them back to back. You got Stokes and Jair. Those are kind of your 4 outside edge, more your traditional cornerbacks. And then you got Nixon and King. And then you're going to have other people that step up too, probably throughout, the rest of training camp and in some of these games. And I'm sure other names are going to pop up. But I don't really think I'm forgetting anybody, but you're going to have other names pop up. You look at that safety position, that one's completely up for debate. We talked last Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever this posted. We talked last week. I'm not going to lie. I thought Javon Bullard would be the runaway guy opposite of Xavier McKinney, but this Evan Williams fella had a hell of a week. Multiple interceptions against not only Jordan Love, but of course, Sean Clifford, who just throws them to the defense, it seems like. that seems like it's going to be a that's one of those interchangeable positions that we got talent and we drafted deep. Not only did we have Bullard and Williams, but we also drafted Keaton Oladapo in the NFL draft. It's a safety from Oregon State. There's a lot of potential to find. That could be a rotating area, a rotating position is what I'm kind of gathering from
Yeah,
when the
and
season gets going.
Oladapo just came back from injury, so we haven't really heard anything or seen what he has to offer. He's a rookie that
Right.
is kind of unknown at this point as far as his capabilities. He's definitely not unknown to Packer fans. I would think that he's one that a lot of Packer fans know because of his didn't he say he's been a lifetime Packer fan or something like that? He dyed his hair gold and stuff like that.
No, I don't know any of his background. Yeah, fill me in, Christian. Lifetime Packer fan, dyed his hair gold. Is there any
No,
more insight you have
no.
outside of
I'd
that?
have to
Whips
I
out
didn't
the
dig
phone.
into it
Okay,
too
that's
much, but
fine.
I feel like when he was drafted, he made mention of something like he's loved the Packers his entire life, and he was gonna dye his hair green or gold or whatever the first day of training camp, and he showed up with gold hair, and so that'll be interesting to see. A lot of people are excited to see what he has to offer, and that's just gonna throw another one of those safeties in the mix for even more competition. And I agree, it's probably gonna be a rotation, at least to begin with, because all those guys that are gonna sit opposite McKinney are young players. They're either rookies or second year guys. So it's probably going to be a rotation to figure out who is going to be the solid safety opposite McKinney.
It's gonna be whoever makes the most plays in preseason, and then they have some joint practices with Denver and Baltimore, who kind of flashes in those moments, but it's a good problem to have. I wanna touch quickly, at least, on Jeff Hafley, because this is his first interview that he's done in training camp. I'm not sure if it's gonna be a weekly thing that he does or if it will be every other week or something like that, but I would encourage everyone to watch this interview. I'm pretty passionate about this because I love this guy. The more I listen to him talk, the more I love what we have at defensive coordinator. And I didn't think that way about Joe Barry for sure. He came from a losing operation in the LA Rams. I didn't like him. I didn't really care for Mike Pettin all that much. He came from a losing organization in Cleveland and left that team was not good. I didn't care about Dom Capers. I thought he was too old and fuck Dom Capers, right? But when we talk about Jeff Hafley, you're looking at a guy. Is that my one F bomb? I don't know if that's. I might have had multiple. We're not keeping track anymore because I want to talk about Jeff Hafley. I love this guy. Take the time. It's a 14-minute interview. Packers.com. You can look it up on YouTube. Just listen to him. I mean, he's so well spoken and confident and talks just it's not all about football. It is, but it isn't. I don't even know how to explain it. Just the fact that his players clearly respect him. He has a different mindset of how to coach and to approach this. And he has that head coach mindset, which I think is helpful. But I, I think he has a lot to prove. I think he's a very smart, intelligent, football minded person. And I think the sky is the limit for what this defense can do under his leadership. And he gives so much credit to the others. They ask him about what do you think about Xavier McKinney? And he brings up whoever the freaking safeties coach is. And I credit the safeties coach. What do you think of Isaiah McDuffie? Yeah, look at the linebackers coach. He's done a great job. It's not, he doesn't talk about himself at all. At the very end of the interview, he talks about, why do you think the players are so more bought in under you versus last year? And he's like, you're going to have to ask the players. I'm not answering that. This isn't football talk. Ask the players. He doesn't want like the fame. He's just such a cool guy. He's an absolute cool guy. I'm at a loss for words. I get giddy. Watch the interview. I think we got ourselves a really good defensive coordinator. And I'm not just saying that out of hyperbole and to be like, ooh, make a headline. I think this might actually be a legitimate defensive coordinator for the first time in like 15, 20
Yeah,
years.
100% agree with 100% agree
Go
with
ahead.
you. It's I really enjoyed watching that interview. I agree with everything you said. It was exciting to watch that interview, which I don't really watch a lot of these coach interviews outside. I mean, I used to not watch. I watch a lot more with what we're doing here. But it was very exciting to watch. I agree with you that I think he is the right fit. He's a great coach. I think Keyshawn Nixon gave a interview last week sometime and said that he's a little crazy, which is a good thing in a defensive coach. When I was in high
Yeah.
school, there was a defensive line coach that was not even just a little bit crazy. He was a lot crazy. He'd get down and on the defensive line and go against these high school kids in pads. He'd come out with a bloody nose or a bloody forehead or whatever. And I played offensive line, so I went against these defensive linemen, and they were the most tenacious and ready to go guys on the field. So having a defensive coach that's a little bit crazy, I think, is a very good thing. I touched on why I think that Hafley's the perfect fit for what we need Quay Walker to develop, his attitude, his responding
Right.
emotionally during the game. I think Hafley's going to be able to rein that in, which is a big deal. But yeah, all the things that he was saying in that interview, I loved to hear. The one thing that popped into my head as I was watching that interview, though, if he's successful, I don't know how long he'll be around because there's going to be other teams that are looking for a new head coach that are
Be
gonna
gone.
snatch him up. So it's great this season,
Yeah.
but if he's uber successful, he may not be around very long. Hopefully not. Hopefully he wants to stay in Green Bay. He doesn't aspire to a head coaching job in the NFL right now, at least, and we have him for a few years. But just watching that interview right away, I was like, oh man, this guy's not going to be around for very long. But yeah, all good things for this season. I'm excited for the defense. And I've had other people mention that this is the first year in a long time that they're actually excited to watch the Packers defense, not just the Packers offense. Because, like you commented, we've had defensive
Yeah.
coordinators for years and years now that just don't seem to be able to figure out putting a solid defense on the field week in and week out. And I think Hafley's that guy. I think that changes this year.
You're right. If he's as good as he potentially could be, he could be gone. And all great teams, successful teams, run the risk of losing their coordinators and stuff to other teams. That's a good problem to have. It means that you're probably successful and you're winning a couple of games. But they finally broke the mold. And credit Matt LaFleur, like I said in a previous episode, that he had to cut ties with Joe Barry, who he had a lot of history with and respect for. But they broke the mold in the fact that Joe Barry had a history and credentials, and Mike Pettin had history and credentials, and they weren't good, but they had, that history of being in the league and being in a position of authority for so long. Dom Capers had a ton of history of being in the league and being an authority. They took a gamble, and I don't even know if it was a gamble. The more I look at it, it clearly isn't. Maybe it's not. But they did their research, and Matt made the decision. There were other flashy names when we were looking for a defensive coordinator back in January and February that kept coming up in the news cycles of they're going to go after this guy. They're going to go after this guy. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Hafley comes out of left field and we're like, who the hell's this guy? Nobody, like, he has one interview from his days in Boston College, and there's like nothing else on this guy. It's like he's a complete blank slate. I love it. He knew him from inner circles. As we discussed, he was on the coaching staff out in San Francisco, I believe, had ties with Kyle Shanahan. Just like how Matt LaFleur wasn't the flashy head coach pick, Jeff Hafley wasn't the flashiest a defensive coordinator pick. It's cool to see, and I'm rooting for the guy. I think that we might actually have escaped our curse, but we have to go out and prove it. We got the talent. Lord knows we have the talent. I love what the players are saying. I love what he's saying. I love the vibe and the energy on that defense. You're 100% right in what you say and what you're hearing from other people, Christian. I'm, for the first time in a very long time, excited to watch some defensive football and not just, oh my God, just hold on and just do enough to stop them, right? Bend, but don't break. I think we possibly have that opportunity here in the
Yeah, it's
2024
exciting
season.
to excited to watch the defense because it looks like we're going to have a solid defense. But on top of that, Jeff Hafley's style of defense is going to be a little more electric. There's not a whole lot more exciting than an interception or a fumble recovery. It always changes the it changes the game completely, and it's what wins and loses games is the turnover battle. So it's exciting to see this new defense, but it's also I think it's going to be actually exciting to watch Just like we're excited to watch a high powered offense, this is going to be a defense that hopefully causes some disruption, sacks, fumbles, turnovers. That's what you want to see from a defense, and those are the defenses that are exciting to watch. So it's going to be fun.
There's a lot of things that I still
Yeah, me
didn't get
too.
a chance to cover. Jordan Love cracked
Yeah,
the top 100 in the NFL
Rashawn Gary.
player ranking. What the number 34
Mm-hmm.
at 50? How did this happen? So there's stuff like that. I mean, these are headlines. I think we haven't had a chance to kind of one off on this. I think, Saturday night is family night. I might stream the practice on Facebook and then have like a Q&A and just be on there if you have an opportunity. It's tough. It's a Saturday night. People have things going on. But I think I'm going to plan on at least streaming that on our Facebook page. So people who do not live local to the Wisconsin area can at least watch it and then maybe do a Q&A sort of a thing and just kind of talk random shit throughout the podcast. But at least I'll have the stream for sure of the practice. And then at the very least, maybe we'll have some commentary on top of it. But I would like to do that because then, you kind of have 3 hours at that point to talk about whatever you want to talk about. We just have to make sure our wives and children are taken care of, which is a huge
Yeah,
problem for both of us. I mean, I know we would be there, but we have this whole
right.
family thing that kind of messes things
You
up in a
know,
good way.
in the future,
So
hopefully we can figure out both of our families actually being at family night, and we can get some content there. We can talk to
yeah,
some Packer fans up close and personal, do some interviews. Hopefully we can do that type of thing in the future. But it only happens if this
that'd be
page
fun.
grows. So like you said at the beginning, likes, comments, share
Yes.
it with your friends. We want everybody to be able to be a part of
Yep.
this. So
I know there's football fans, and hopefully you enjoy the content enough, especially as the season gets going. There's so much to talk about, and right now we've been focused mainly on the Packers, but there's going to be other teams and other division rivals and stuff that we do want to break down and get into more. We're just trying to keep the episodes somewhere right around an hour for now as we talk about training camp, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of things to talk about throughout the regular season. So we'll wrap it up for now. Thank you for checking out the video. Episode 3 is concluded. Share the word, comment, subscribe, and until next time, Christian, I will see you guys on the internet. Thanks for watching.